Welcome to the LowCarbUSA podcast, where we seek to inspire you to help us build this community. I'm Doug Reynolds.
And this is Pam Devine.
All right, so today we have Belinda Fettke here with us. We just got out of the long weekend of LowCarbUSA San Diego conference, and we've had a lovely time learning. We wanted to expand a little bit on Belinda's talk and her research that she's put out over the last year or so. And we wanted to talk to Belinda about, could you tell us a little bit about what your concerns are currently with what's being taught in the medical curriculum these days?
Well, I think the concern is if you think back to what doctors have been taught for the last 50 years, they've had the low-fat, high-carb mantra pushed on them, and we know very well the health outcomes that have occurred from that. The tsunami of non-communicable disease is just shocking, and to turn around that low-fat medical education that they've been indoctrinated with is still a struggle. Like, we're still struggling to make them understand how important healthy saturated fats are in the diet and not to fear cholesterol. So I'm not talking about the science, because I'm concerned that the science isn't really science at all, and it's been based on vested interests and religious ideology. Specifically the Seventh-day Adventist Church, which are very anti-meat and anti-dairy, pro-cereal, grain and soy. And the concern at this point in time, which is what I highlighted in the talk that I've just done, is that the medical curriculum that's being developed by a group called the ElMed, or the Lifestyle Medicine Education Collaborative, is an intersection between exercise as medicine with the backing of Coca-Cola and lifestyle medicine, which is based on the ideology of the Seventh-day Adventist Church that fruits, nuts and seeds are the God-appointed diet of man and the original diet in the Garden of Eden. And even though they call it vegetarianism, that's because vegan wasn't termed until 1944 or coined. And so if you think about it, fruits, nuts and seeds aren't vegetarian, they are vegan. So this Garden of Eden diet that's being promoted, this ElMed collaborative is already being trialled in at least 5 universities in America at the moment, if not, someone mentioned they thought it was up to 8. And I actually had an email from a medical student 2 nights ago saying, please send me everything you've got, because we're at Catholic education and we've just been found out we're going to start learning the Lifestyle Medicine Education Collaborative here. And I'm trying to tell my university, wait a minute, this is a religious indoctrination of a diet and an exercise program. And you have to consider this ElMed collaborative, the idea of it, and it is to go globally. They're already trying to get it into Australia as well. It's to get health professionals to write prescriptions for people to move more, eat less meat. And I think it's very concerning that it's based on religious ideology and vested interests. The Seventh-day Adventist Church belief that we need to cut out meat from our diet, and Coca-Cola believing we need to move more, eat less, the whole calories in, calories out concept of energy balance. And they've intersected and aligned with each other to become very powerful allies.
Yeah, and not really based on scientific evidence of how our bodies, what nutrients it needs to fuel better and avoid chronic disease, right?
Yeah, I would say it's not based on science that is based on biology and physiology and chemistry. It's very much, if you look at Coca-Cola's evidence and their science, their scientific evidence, it's been industry funded for a very, very long time, really promoting this energy balance, calories in, calories out, and that people have to move more and eat less. And it puts the responsibility onto individuals.
Yes.
You know, health washes the harms of sugar and processed food. And then when you combine that with a religious ideology that believes we shouldn't be eating meat, like it's actually sinful and it defiles our body to eat meat and dairy. And, you know, this is a very powerful ideology getting into our medical education and into our dietary and health guidelines.
Yes. And we'd like to see it becoming from a point of better health. We understand that vegetarians and vegans are going to make a choice. and they're going to have that choice, but we'd like it to see it based on what might be better health and what would make them healthier people and nutrition wise. If they make those choices just because, they want to choose not to hurt animals and animal welfare and all that as a personal choice, that's one thing, right?
Well, I'm not anti-vegan.
Exactly.
I'm not anti-religion. I'm pro-choice.
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to highlight today.
And so I think this, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think this whole concept it's about personal choice for religious reasons, for ethical concerns, for health. Some people believe it, and also for cultural. This cultural and religious ideology is very important. I mean, we all know that Jewish people have clean and unclean meats, and so do the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So I'm not trying to force my dietary eating habits or my beliefs on anyone else.
Right.
It's more about allowing the choice and not silencing the debate or stopping people who are eating or including animal proteins and fats in their diet for their health.
Right.
This is it's about health, and where do we take it from there?
Yes, because there are a lot of people who are seeing the benefits of animal-based foods, meat-based diets, providing a lot of good amino acids and nutrient-dense vitamins and minerals that our bodies needs, and we don't want people to be influenced to not include those in their diet.
No.
For alternate reasons other than for the,
Yeah, well, there's a huge role for people who have been practicing vegetarianism or veganism for a very long time to contribute to guidelines to help people who choose to follow that way maintain their health. But these people shouldn't be writing guidelines to stop everyone, a one-size-fits-all diet.
Yes.
When you've got so many people who've got non-communicable disease, metabolic issues that are compromised by eating a plant-based diet, or what I believe would be compromised.
Right. It's not the healthiest diet for everyone, so we just want everybody to have an informed choice.
Yes.
And be able to. So maybe you could tell us how people could find out more about your what you're learning, what you would like people to have for resources, where they could learn to make these kind of nutritious choices for themselves, and some of the research that you've been doing recently, and how they can find out more about that.
Okay, well, I don't have a lot of the science and I don't have a lot of resources on my website. I really encourage people to go to Diet Doctor, to Virta Health. There's lots of other people that have some really good resources with recipes. And certainly if you want to look at the clinical guidelines, LowCarbUSA is offering an amazing resource for health professionals at the moment that I can't recommend highly enough. But to look at the research, and the reason I started all this was because my husband, who's an orthopaedic surgeon in Tasmania, was being silenced by the cereal industry and the Dietitians Association of Australia from telling people to reduce sugar and carbohydrates in their diet. We had no idea that he was being silenced for recommending people incorporate or include animal proteins and fats. And so I watched Gary and many others in the low carb space talking about the science over and over again, and realized that it's not about the science. So how do we, what are the forces behind all this?
Right.
And it became more and more obvious that it wasn't just vested interests. It wasn't just the sugar industry and the cereal industry and no doubt pharmaceutical industries that were wanting, that were promoting, I would say, our sick care industry rather than a healthcare industry. But it was also a very deep belief in religious ideology that meat is sinful. And so when I came across this ideology and realized that, well, for one, the expert witness in Gary's case was employed by Sanitarium, which in Australia is wholly owned by the Seventh-day Adventist Church, that took me down this tunnel. So my research is available currently on the isupportgary.com website, but under the guidance of Nina Teicholz, we're going to start to work towards making it more of an academic nutrition research study, not just mama bear fighting to protect her husband and clear his name.
Yes.
So taking this information now onto a new website that will be nutritionscience.com.au, and working with her to start to write some academic papers into into how religious ideology and vested interests are shaping our dietary and health guidelines, and I don't think it's fair.
Yeah, and we'd encourage all of our listeners to take a look at the resources and make those decisions for themselves. See where people are uncovering over the last 100 years or more. Where do the recommendations come from? How have they evolved over the years? Who has been influencing them? Because I think there's a lot of people who think, well, they're guidelines and they're things that we should follow, but they don't realize that we've only had these guidelines since in the 1970s. There were some influences from the early 1900s into the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, but they've evolved only from then. I mean, in the 1800s, people weren't told what they should eat. They kind of were eating meat and vegetables and fruit when it was seasonal. And
in fairness, industry was all changing.
Yes.
Social conditions were changing.
Yes.
You had a lot of communicable disease. So when you consider what the time was like and all of those factors, you can understand how some of these thoughts came about.
Yes.
There was no refrigeration and, transportation. People were moving into cities. So I think it's an incredible history.
It is.
And looking into the history of the guidelines has been fascinating. But where it's culminating right now with this, just imagine if next generation's medical education is the plant-based Garden of Eden diet with a side of Coke. How will we ever
Going to beat metabolic disease?
Metabolic disease. How will we turn the next tsunami of chronic disease around? And I think this is why it's so important to discuss and for people to be aware of what I'm uncovering.
Yeah, I think so too. So thank you for joining us today, Belinda. We're really honored to have you. We hope that all of you will reach out and ask questions, do your own research, look at where everything's coming from and make your own choices and share knowledge with the people that you come in contact with. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam.
Awesome.
20 minutes.
Is that okay?
That's awesome. So you'll notice that we haven't had any commercials at all during this podcast, and we intend to keep it like that if we possibly can. But at the same time, the work that we're doing and the efforts that we're going to get the clinical guidelines done, there's just so much to do. And in order to really, for this to be sustainable, we need your help. And so what we're asking you to do is go and take a look at our Patreon account. There's actually quite a few options there. It provides you with options to actually go onto our site, and there's membership options there where you can get access to all our video content and other perks of being a member, or even just $1 a month, become a patron. And you can find that in patreon.com/LowCarbUSA. I'll put it in the show notes and in the episode notes so that you can find it. And help us to change the world.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people take a look at the conference registrations, and I think they immediately assume that, from a distance, that these might be money-making endeavors that we're doing with these conferences. And it's hard to admit, and it's hard to tell people that we really aren't making any money from these. All 11 of the events that we've done have not been a profitable endeavor. We've literally had to dip into our credit, basically. It wasn't anything. It wasn't like we actually had a pocket to dip into and put money into. We've had to take loans and get a lot of credit for these events. So any little bit that you can help, every ticket that's sold, every little bit of $1 a month in a Patreon account will help us to fund our endeavors and fund the programs so that we continue to do some of these other things that are free content. The project management that we're doing on the clinical guidelines will really go a long way.